Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This went down like 5 years ago. My family managed a couple of apartment complexes, 2 buildings with 3 units each. We lived in 2 of those apartments, rented out the other 4. It was just rows of these 3 flat joints lining the street for blocks. Most spots didn't have much parking. The side roads had houses, but you'd be lucky to snag a spot on those too. Our place had a decent-sized lot though, being a residential unit too, so we could fit around 16 cars in our lot. Stayed smooth for years like that. Then randos started pulling into our parking spaces, not our tenants or nothing. One afternoon I boxed this one guy in, came outside to him just plowing through our bushes, ripping up the yard trying to get out. Called the cops, but they couldn't really do jack. That's when we got a towing company to install signs saying they'd yank any unauthorized vehicles. Had to give them a ring to come tow, but it put a stop to the randoms at least. Except for this one New Year's Eve, pulled up to find every last spot jammed. Cars lining the street too, blocking everything in. I was fuming, called the tow guys, but they were completely swamped. No one coming for hours. We're out in the Chicago burbs. Bitter cold that night too. Then it hit me, the sprinklers. Dug those babies out, ran a heated hose from the laundry room so they wouldn't freeze up. But oh man, did those cars and pavement get an icy shower. 3 sprinklers rotating every half hour or so for like 5 hours straight. Every inch of parking, every car, the whole street just encased. Made sure to really hose down the locks, windshields, grills, you name it. Packed it in around midnight, crashed hard. 4 a.m. rolls around, sudden eruption of furious pounding, doorbell ringing nonstop. We just chuckled to ourselves, dialed up the cops, waited for them to show before stepping outside. The officers could barely hold it together, trying not to laugh. Turned out these geniuses got duped by some idiot from a few buildings over, told them to park here for his party. The same dingus that plowed through our yard months ago, pointed right at the tow warning, told them to get their frozen cars out of here or they're getting hauled. In our town, cops can slap tickets on private lots if the owner allows it. Let's just say a whole bunch of partiers ended up catching expensive tows too, on top of the fines, since no one could get into their cars. Really wish we had that madness on video. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my cozy little house on Elm Street for over 15 years now. It's not much, just a simple single-story home with a small front yard and backyard. But it's my slice of suburbia that I've worked hard for and love coming home to after a long day's work. That all changed when a new neighbor moved in next door. From the moment she arrived, I could tell this woman was going to be trouble. She just had that entitled, "Let me speak to your manager" look about her, and boy, was I right. The day after she moved in, I was doing some gardening in my front yard when I heard her nasally voice call out, "Excuse me, this is my yard, what do you think you're doing?" I looked up, confused to see her glaring at me from her front door. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. She huffed, walking over to me. "I said this is my yard, that tree is on my property, and this flower bed is in my yard too. You need to leave immediately." I stood up, utterly baffled by her claims. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about. This is my property that I've lived on for over 15 years. Your house is next door." "How dare you!" she screeched. "Don't you know who I am? I am the president of the Homeowners Association, and I will not tolerate trespassers." I tried to explain that there was no homeowner association in our neighborhood, but she just kept yelling about me being on her property. Eventually, I gave up and went inside. Clearly, there was no reasoning with this woman. Over the next few weeks, she repeatedly accused me of trespassing anytime I so much as stepped into my own front yard. She would march over and scream at me to get off her land if she saw me doing yard work or washing my car. I started avoiding going outside just to prevent running into her. One Saturday afternoon, I was relaxing indoors when flashing red and blue lights caught my attention outside. I looked out the window to see a police cruiser parked in my driveway and 2 officers approaching my front door. That's when the panic set in. I hurried to open the door before they could knock. "Officers, what seems to be the problem?" I asked nervously. One officer eyed me suspiciously. "We received a call that there was a trespasser on this property refusing to leave. Would you care to explain yourself?" My jaw dropped in disbelief. That delusional woman next door had actually called the cops on me. I quickly clarified that I was the homeowner and certainly not trespassing. The officers apologized for the confusion and said they would go speak to my neighbor to sort this out. I watched as they walked over and knocked on her door. Moments later, I could hear her shrill voice screeching loudly as the cops talked to her. She was yelling about me being a liar and that she owned the neighborhood. I saw her point angrily at my house and even try to push past the officers towards my home at one point. Eventually, the cops had enough of her bizarre behavior and slapped cuffs on her. I could scarcely believe my eyes as the officers hauled her still screaming self into the back of their cruiser. She kept insisting she did nothing wrong and that I was the criminal. It was a scene straight out of a comedy sketch. Later on, I gave my statement about all the harassment I dealt with since she moved in. The police informed me she would be charged with falsifying a police report and disorderly conduct. I found out from other neighbors that she had been terrorizing them too with her delusional claims of owning the whole block. We all breathed a sigh of relief knowing she would be locked up for a good long while. The peace and quiet of having my home back was beyond rewarding. No more looking over my shoulder in my own yard or dealing with her crazy accusations. She only had herself to blame for letting her entitlement land her in jail. In the end, her lies caught up to her. Calling cop with fictional accusations got her arrested instead of me. Maybe next time she'll think twice before trying to claim properties that don't belong to her. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened many years ago. I'm an IT contractor living in England. I got a job working next to the Welsh Assembly in Wales. Shockingly. Typically, I'd travel on bicycle, train, since there wasn't really a need for a car in Cardiff. One week I needed my car there for something, so I arrive early Monday morning. Between the Welsh Assembly and our building was a triangle of land that belonged to the WA, but they'd not included it inside their wall, so it was just this triangle of unmaintained mud grass, big enough for one car parallel to the wall or two cars perpendicular. I arrived, parked with enough space for another car. There was usually one parked there. Midway through the day, I get called over by my boss, who asks if I've parked there. He says that his boss is pissed because I'm parked there. I argue over it being public land, etc. I'm told that this boss gets the say on my contract and doesn't need a reason to end my contract. Fine, I'll move my car. Within 30 minutes of moving my car, boss's boss has turned his around so nobody else can park there. This annoys me. The following Sunday, I visit the local car hire company and find out that because of the miracle of the British train network, it costs me about an extra £1.20 to hire a car for the week. Off to Cardiff I go. Car gets parked there from 6 a.m. Monday all the way through to 6 p.m. Friday. Boss asks if it's mine. Of course, the next one is a malicious compliance story. This just happened and I'm still laughing my butt off. I'm a 25-year-old MTF trans woman that's been on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for 3 years now. Because of this, my body looks naturally feminine. Like it takes people a while to catch on. My voice is softer and it hurts to deepen it. This is important information, I promise. I work as a vendor for one of the major beverage companies. Basically, I go to stores and stock shelves of my company's products. I'm listening to music, a playlist of video game themes remixed, with one earbud in, like allowed, when a mid-30s-year-old man walks over. "Wow, girl, you are super thick. Wouldn't mind taking you home with me," he said with a bit too much confidence. I just continue working, ignoring him. He continues, "Oh, come on, don't be like that. I'm quite large under these pants, if you know what I mean. Something a sweet ass like yours needs." I continue to ignore, getting embarrassed and very uncomfortable. That's when the music turns to the theme from Halo and he says what I needed. "Come, oh cutie, say something to me." Inspired by the music, I instantly had a thought. It hurts a lot to do a masculine voice, however. In that moment, I took a deep breath and turned to him. I looked at him with a very enthusiastic smile, and he looks like a kid in a candy store, bouncing a bit like, "Oh boy, I actually got one." Going back to my roots, I took a deep breath, and in the most deep masculine voice I could muster, I said to him, "You're cute as well. Sure, I wouldn't mind having my way with you." Afterwards, I start coughing, my throat hurting, yet it worked. The dude jumped back a good foot and yelled out, "Oh, hell no! Duck this, nope, hell no." He ran out of the store so fast, constantly looking over his shoulder as if I was following him. The store's workers were laughing their asses off, mostly all the female workers. One came up to me and asked, "How did you do that voice? I could never get mine to sound." "Oh, you're trans. That makes sense." That made my day, and is why I'm still laughing in my car writing this. The next one is an entitled people story. This is a weird story that just happened over the weekend, thought y'all might enjoy it. So, Saturday night the missus and I are lying in bed trying to go to sleep when I hear some noise from the back door. Storm door opens and slams shut. I'm not fully asleep yet, so I put on pants and shirt I can find and grab my trusty shotgun. We moved to the mountainside, and most of the area is still wooded, and living in such condition, wild animals are an issue. We have bears, coyote, raccoon, and bobcat to name a few. So, as I'm moving to the back door, I hear a window break in the back garage. I look out and see someone breaking into my garage. I scream for the wife to call the sheriff office. Around here, cop doesn't work well for breaking in. We are connected with a couple of counties, and it gets confusing for them. We get quicker response by calling them directly. I'm now in go mode thinking some meth head is trying to score some tools for some quick cash. Got out of the house and noticed this person truck still running. I did the only thing I could think of and took the key out of the truck and put it in my pocket and waited for the deputies to show up. Took them 20 minutes to show up. One was state police, the other was local sheriff deputy who were doing radar 10 miles up the road. Wife and I know them both. With my gun in hand, I told them someone was in the garage and I haven't approached it yet, but here's the key to the perp truck. They go in, gun donned out, and deal with the situation. The dude was passed out on an old bench seat for an old truck I have by the tool bench. They wake him up and arrest him with little to no issues other than him screaming profanity at them. They told me that I can press charge and to come in on Monday to file the paperwork. He's not getting out anytime soon since on top of his breaking in, he's being charged with a DUI. Yesterday, I spent the day traveling trying to fix the window this broke since no stores that are open Sunday in my local area. While in my travels, I'm fuming at the fact that I'm having to do this repair on a piece of junk door from the 70 SS. My wife was telling me to maybe let him go with a warning, but I'm having none of it, so this morning I went to the sheriff office. The same deputy was there that arrested the perpetrator, so I asked him how the ride with the dude was. This is the version the officer gave me. Officer: why did you break into the garage? Perp: I was trying to get my stuff back, but someone changed the lock. Officer: you know they purchased that place from Kevin 2 years ago, right? Perp: what? That doesn't give them the right to change the lock without telling me. Officer: yeah, they can. You ain't been in that house for like 4 years, and I was the one who got you out of that house because you beat the hell out of your old lady. That's twice I get to arrest you on the same property. Perp: but he shouldn't be entitled to change the locks, though. Where else am I supposed to go? A little backstory on the property: we purchased it from Kevin, who's a school board member, and gave us a decent deal on the property. He had the property as a rental for his nephew for a few years. When his nephew started walking in his dad's footstep by getting drunk and beating his girlfriend at the time, he evicted him from the property 2 years before we purchased it. When he evicted him, he emptied the content of the garage as all scrap metal. He found that out Sunday morning when his uncle paid him a visit in jail. Kevin had other renters on the property after. He sold it to us because he didn't want the responsibility of it anymore. He's being charged with trespassing, criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, driving under the influence, and property damage of less than $500. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I, 33F, going to preface this by saying my 6-year-old daughter's father, 37M, I'm going to call him Jeff, has never been my romantic partner. We had a one-night stand. I don't like people calling him my ex, since it makes it seem we had some kind of emotional attachment. He was never involved after I told him I was pregnant and actually wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. But I decided to raise my child alone since I have enough money to raise her without child support. For the whole pregnancy and the first 4 years, Jeff was not in the picture. On my mother's recommendation, I did send him pictures and invited him to special events, but he always replied he had no interest in my daughter. 2 years ago, he reappeared and began demanding parental rights. When I didn't do what he wanted, he sued and was told no, he was not getting parental rights. He was given the offer to pay child support and then we can revisit giving him actual rights, but he has refused. He has the money, much more than me, but he refuses. I still offered to let him see my daughter in a casual manner, no child support needed, with the agreement anything legal, medical, or educational will not involve him. He pushed the boundaries and we had a fallout. After that, we didn't hear from him for almost 6 weeks before he called to meet for Christmas. After much discussion, I agreed to bring my daughter over on the condition my daughter's godparents could come. Thus, we went over for Christmas dinner, and finding out Jeff is married and had never told his family he had a child. It was great to be judged by a bunch of strangers. It was uncomfortable the whole time. I'm going to use fake names, but let's say my daughter's name is Katie. His wife kept calling my daughter Gabrielle, not the actual name she used, but it was that different to my daughter's name. The wife was also very physical, trying to pick up my daughter or parent her. I would block her or tell her to please let me deal with my child. The whole time she pretty much ignored me, but Katie didn't seem nervous, so I decided to just bid my time. I hit my limit when my daughter said she needed the bathroom and this stranger went, "Oh, Gabby, you need potty? Let mommy change you." My daughter hasn't worn diapers in a while now, and she's more than capable of going alone to the bathroom. I immediately told her to stay away from my daughter and that we were leaving. The woman starting wailing that I was kidnapping her baby girl and tried to lunge at me. Her in-laws got in the middle and hold her, consoling her and saying that we weren't leaving and for her to calm down like she was the victim. At that point, I just glared at Jeff and told him he better explain or I would be calling the police. He asked me to speak in private in another room and that I could just leave my daughter with his parents. No way that would ever happen. Katie's godparents took her with them, despite the wife having a full meltdown. Jeff and I spoke outside, and he explained that he and his wife recently lost a daughter. I'm not going to give specific details on that. All I'll say, it was sudden and nobody's fault. And, as I can only imagine, it had caused some psychological issues to his wife. Apparently, he had the brilliant idea that having Katie pass as their lost child would help his wife, without telling me. And that's why he wanted visitations and parental rights. He pleaded for me to leave my daughter with him for a little bit. I asked him what was his plan when his wife heals. His response was disgusting. Well, I'll just send Katie back with you and it will be just like before. I told him he was insane if he thought I would let him use my daughter like that. What his wife needs is therapy with a professional, not feeding her delusions. And I would not let that woman within miles from my daughter. He told me I was being cruel and didn't know the pain of losing a child. I agreed with him, but reminded Jeff that my priority is not his family. It's my child. What he and his family do to work through their grief has nothing to do with us. I also told him to call his lawyer because I am making sure he never has contact with my child. So that's what I'm bracing for. He's been blasting my phone since Christmas, but I can easily ignore him. My daughter and I are doing a small travel vacation. This isn't an update, just something I feel needs to be said. My daughter is set for life monetarily. She has a trust, and I make really good money in my position. If she was 18 right now, I could put her through college without a loan. She doesn't need child support for quality of life. If I could get child support and never worry about her father trying something, I would be suing him in a heartbeat. But after talking to a lawyer and realizing the risk, I've taken the decision that child support or possible inheritance is not worth my child's safety. Safety is always first. The 6th of January, 2024. Hey everyone, Happy New Year's. This isn't so much a real update as just letting people know we are home and safe. My daughter is spending the rest of her vacation with her godparents on another trip while I work on things. Moving might be something I'll be looking into, though that is a long-term plan considering all it takes. I won't share too many details on what my lawyer is going to be doing, but we are absolutely going to push for an RO. I might not post for some time, at least not until things settled. I do appreciate all the support and good advice. I'm taking a lot of it into account as I plan how to move forward. The next one is an entitled People Story.
I live in an apartment complex. Neighbor below me continues to smoke, which then blows into my apartment. I can't stand the smell. They've been asked to stop and a complaint lodged with Strata. They live on the bottom floor, so their courtyard extends out a few meters past my balcony, and this is where they sit and smoke. So now, I use a Bluetooth speaker angled down at their courtyard and I play children's highly repetitive songs, The Wiggles, whenever they're out there smoking. I have to shut all the windows since they're smoking, so I can't hear it, so it doesn't bother me, but they don't seem to enjoy it all that much.
The next story is titled HOA called the police on me for having a wheelchair-accessible RV in my driveway and towed it away. I sued them for $265,000. I'm here to tell you about the difficult experience my family went through when we moved into a new neighborhood. My husband is a veteran and was injured while serving in Afghanistan, leaving him wheelchair-bound. To make life easier for him and our family, we purchased an RV with wheelchair access. We parked it in our driveway, and that's when the trouble started. Our homeowner association, HOA, began sending us fines for public obstruction. We tried explaining the situation, but they wouldn't listen. They claimed that the RV was too big for our driveway, even though we had done our due diligence and made sure it would fit before we made the purchase. One day, the police showed up at our door, claiming they received an anonymous tip about strange noises coming from our RV. They searched the RV and found nothing, but it was clear that our HOA was behind this. We felt harassed and targeted, and we didn't know what to do. The harassment continued, and it took a toll on our family. We felt like we didn't belong in this neighborhood, and we were constantly on edge. One day, we decided to take a road trip with our RV to clear our minds. When we returned home, we found our front yard in flames. The fire had spread from a neighbor's yard, destroying our fence and our spare pickup truck. We were devastated, but we didn't know who was responsible for the fire. The next morning, we woke up to find our RV was missing. We suspected that our HOA had something to do with it, especially since we received no notice or warning about it being towed away. We were furious and went straight to our HOA president's house to confront him. He denied knowing anything about it, but we weren't convinced. We called the police to report the RV stolen, and the investigation led us straight to the impound lot where our RV was being held. The HOA president was caught red-handed, and he and the HOA were ordered to pay $265,000 in damages. It was a small victory for our family, but it was a win nonetheless. We were finally able to get the justice we deserved. However, our victory was short-lived. A few months later, we received a letter from our mortgage lender stating that they were going to foreclose on our home. We were shocked and didn't know what to do. It turned out that our HOA had placed a lien on our property for the $265,000 in damages they were ordered to pay us. We couldn't believe it. We thought we had won, but now we were about to lose everything. We decided to fight back and hired a lawyer to represent us. We spent countless hours in court and the stress was overwhelming. But we refused to give up. After months of legal battles, we finally won our case. The HOA was ordered to remove the lien on our property and our home was safe. As an update, we have since moved out of that neighborhood and into a new community that is much more welcoming and accepting of our needs. It was a difficult experience, but we learned that standing up for ourselves is always worth it in the end. We hope that by sharing our story, we can inspire others to do the same.
The next story is titled, the car dealerships and trying to upsell you. Took my car in for an oil and filter change. Oil and filter. That's it. Sat waiting in the Toyota lobby for this to get done. For some reason, it takes an hour and a half. Guy comes back with my key and proceeds to tell me that the air filter is dirty. Also tells me I need new brakes. We're in the lobby, and it's full of people sitting around and waiting for their cars also to be finished. I reply to the guy as loud and obnoxiously as I can, I change the air filter myself, which is located in the glove box at the back, and it was with a carbon filter, hence why it looks black. I had one set of brakes changed towards the tail end of 2020, with ceramic brakes that were rated for 100,000 miles of use, and the other set of brakes were just done this past summer after a trip to Colorado and squeaking that was occurring. That paperwork is also in the glove box if you would like me to dig it out. I cannot stand it when they try to upsell you every time. Also, I went in for an oil and filter change. Why are you looking at my brakes? The next story is titled, Mean High School Teacher Payback. So back when I was in high school, I had one teacher who was particularly mean. She was an older lady and she had it out for me for some reason. She was my first class of the day, and it always tainted my day. She was clearly going through menopause because her classroom was always like a freezer. I would be literally shaking. So I started wearing my jacket to class to stay warm. She decided to implement a rule targeting at me, that no jackets could be worn in class because it was a fire hazard. It literally made no sense. So one day I'm wearing my jacket in her class and she asks me to remove it. I comply, but I'm wearing a tank top underneath. This is against the dress code. When girls would break the dress code as punishment, the principal would make them wear their jackets. This is in the days before Gen X and students fighting sexist dress codes. She sent me straight to the principal, who asked me to then wear my jacket. The frustration in her face by outsmarting her was priceless. I'm still proud. The next story is titled, Did I Do That? A Little Tale of Side Revenge. This is part of a much bigger ongoing saga that should reach a conclusion soon, and may make an appearance in Pro Revenge. However, it's pretty satisfying on its own. Sorry I'm not more specific on some things, but future legal concerns. A short time ago, I was unjustly fired. A few days after, I wrote a response to their severance offer that included an entire account of the crap show that had taken place. I made sure to send it to all the CXO dogs, except for one charming fellow. Now, the very day they fired me, I had come into some interesting info about CF that I thought might be valuable. So, when I was countering their offer, I casually mentioned that XX amount shouldn't be a problem for the company since they could afford to pay a certain expense for CF at over thousands of dollars a month. To be honest, I was only guessing at the amount, but I had a good ballpark estimate. I was also betting on the fact that none of the other Sea Dogs knew about this arrangement. 3 days later, CF resigned from the company. I also heard that the rumors circulating about him and his sudden resignation included the word embezzlement. The next story is titled, "Entitled Mother Attempts to Steal My Nintendo Switch and Thousands of Dollars Worth of Games, then Tries to Get Me Arrested for It." To preface this, I recently graduated from university and landed myself a pretty well-paying job working as an analyst for a major banking company. My first day is the week after next. A couple of weeks ago, I moved to a gated apartment complex in a wealthy suburb of DC, and I'm making use of their gym. On days that I work my upper body, I use a game called Fitness Boxing 2 with their in-gym punching bag. Now, my community regularly does apartment tours that include their facilities, so I will see one of the employees walking around with people, and early today, it was a woman with her 8 or 9-year-old son. This kid immediately takes an interest in the game I'm playing, and I offered to let him try it out, but his mom called him back and I was nearly done anyway, so I put my Switch in its case and put it in the cubbies that people put their things in. Now, a few minutes later, I'm on one of the other pieces of equipment, and I see the kid walking out with his mom, carrying my Switch case. I immediately knew it was mine, because I have a very brightly colored one. But even then, I go to double check that my Switch was gone, and sure enough, it was. Now, everyone's been an annoying kid at some point, so I'm actually not particularly mad. I catch up to them and the tour guide, and speak to the mom, telling her that her son walked out with my Switch. I figured she'd be embarrassed and have him give it back, treating it like a learning lesson or something, but instead, she takes it from him and says, "No, that's his game. You must be mistaken." I was bewildered. My initial reaction was, this isn't funny, because I could not fathom how somebody could be so quick to lie about something like this. Now, I look at the tour guide. I don't know her really, but we do see each other on a regular basis as I'm really trying to be consistent with going to the gym. She knows it's mine, tries to ask the woman if she's sure, and of course, this is when she gets angry and says that if I keep harassing her and her family, she'll call the police. On one hand, I'm like, good, call them, because I can readily prove it's mine, and we'll get to that. On the other hand, and I want to preface this by saying that I believe in getting rid of all identity-based assumptions, but that is a belief, not a reality. The reality is that if you're a man, especially a black man like myself, who has gotten at least semi-muscular, when you're in a public argument with a hysterical white woman, you have to pick your words very, very carefully. So, of course, she calls the cops, yelling, saying a scary African American is harassing her and her son and trying to steal his game. And, like I said, wealthy suburb. So, a police officer is on the scene within minutes. I have to thank my lucky stars that the cop was smart enough to not immediately take sides and simply walked up to ask what was going on. So, of course, I let her go first, with her once again saying that I've been following her and her son. We were literally in the apartment clubhouse lobby, and trying to grab his game. After the cops looked to me, I put on my calmest, most docile voice to say, "That is not her son's Switch. It is mine. He took it from the gym cubbies, and if you have her open the case and turn it on, I will prove that it's mine instantly, because my Switch has a lock on it." And this is when the tour lady also says that she's pretty sure it's mine too. For those who don't know, you can jury-rig a lock code on the Switch using the Parental Controls app, so that you'd have to put in a PIN to play games or reset the Switch. It doesn't stop you from buying games though, unsurprisingly. The woman of course doesn't want to do this, saying I've caused her enough trouble, but luckily the cop wanted to hear me out. So this woman takes the Switch out of the case and turns it on. Firstly, I point to the profile at the top, which is of my me that looks exactly like me. This woman manages to turn on a dime and say that they just recently bought it from a friend. That looks exactly like me. So I respond with, "Did that friend give you the parental controls password?" She says, "That's mine. I'm the parent. So turn it off." "I don't have to show anything to you." She immediately turns it off again and tries to put it away. But luckily, once again, this cop says that she has to show it if it really is hers. She turns it on and pauses because she has absolutely no idea how it works, so I kindly say, "You press the button at the top to prompt the PIN." Then I get my phone out. So she tries to put in a random combination, and of course, it doesn't work. And the interesting thing about the Switch parental controls is that if you put it in wrong, it sends a notification to the app. So within 30 seconds, I was showing the cop the "your PIN was entered incorrectly" pop-up. Finally, this woman starts apologizing, saying it was an honest mistake, and hands me back my Switch in the case, and has the audacity to ask the tour lady to continue the tour. The cop says that it would be best that she leaves, and says that he's going to escort her to the car. This is when she gets mad at the complex, and says that she's never giving them her business, as she gets walked out the door. That's honestly what ticks me off. There's no happy ending. I have every game I've bought in the 4 years I've owned this Switch in this case, so between that and the Switch, stealing is well into the grand theft range. If the cop had immediately been against me, I would have been in jail by now. I would have lost my job that I haven't even started yet, and all the work I've put in for the past years to get here, for something that they would have quickly found out that they can't even use in the first damn place. And all she got was a nice stroll to her vehicle. I guess that's better than potentially having her and her crotch goblin as a neighbor. The next story is titled, "Dumped Me But Stayed Signed Into Your Netflix, Did You?" So, my girlfriend dumped me a few years back after cheating, and I'm completely over it. Anyway, like I've said, I'm over it, so I thought that now was the best time to carry out my revenge. Because I'm over it. So, I noticed that she left her Netflix logged in on my laptop, and Google has remembered the password. I have had my own since, but it always asks which account I'm going to log into and pre-populates her passwords, etc. So, about last month, I just logged into it. I don't know why, but just was kind of half interested in what she'd been watching. I saw that she had been watching Breaking Bad, and was on Season 2, Episode 3, and just logged out and didn't think much of it. Until 3 a.m. I woke up and had devised the most devious plan. I logged back into her account and just started letting it play right from where she had left off. Left it a couple of hours, then turned it off. So next time she logged in, it would have skipped a few episodes and the point as to where she was. I then started putting shows on I know she doesn't like, so it comes up on her recommended and really ducks up the algorithm. I just can't wait till she starts getting suggestions based on shows she doesn't like. It'd be a real shame if her and her new boyfriend fell out and started accusing the other of watching Breaking Bad when the other wasn't there, wouldn't it? Anyway, I'm over it, and not bitter anyway, so all good. Hope all goes well for her when she accuses her BF of watching Paw Patrol. The next story is titled, "Karen Left Diet Books at a Little Library by a Playground." She caught me chucking them out and had a dummy spit about how it's knowledge and I shouldn't throw them away. She said she would throw me on the ground, and said I looked like I had a mental problem. Kept calm and didn't argue with her, let her make a fool of herself in front of people as she jammed her stupid books back in there. As soon as her back was turned, I put them in the bin with the rest. In hindsight, perhaps I should have suggested she ask for a refund because clearly they didn't work. The last story is titled, "My Neighbor Chose the Wrong One." We moved into a place a year ago. First-time buyers into a tenement building with a shared garden. The stairwell, or close as it is often termed, is self-factored, which gives the place a nice vibe and made it an appealing place to live. Upstairs neighbor was all over us when we arrived, checking in, sharing cakes and recipes, sitting in the garden with us and our dog, and generally things were lovely. We put on a few barbecues for our neighbors to help meet everyone and set us off to a good start. Precisely 1 year on, and upstairs neighbor now has an issue with the dog being in the garden, as he has damaged some of her flowers. This is obviously not what we wanted, so straight away I suggest that I will happily spend my own money to supply timber and a handyman to build raised beds to prevent this happening again, and to make gardening easier for her. It'd be approximately $600 to do this. She complained of bending down and that she would be happier with raised beds previously. But not this day. Today she wants to moan and moan and moan and moan. I walked away. I saw her the next day, and she went off again when I repeated my offer. Who's going to dig out the plants? And what about the soil I put in there? Then the law is on my side. The who what now? Moving on from there, I walk away and vow never to speak with her again, and to reduce our use of the garden we pay to share. Next, she builds spikes and puts in barbed wire. Obviously to deter the dog or hurt him if he tries to go near the plants again. Big mistake. Linked is my pettiest of revenge. You may have heard of it. It is called an Annoyotron. Powered by an insanely small battery, it lets out random, irritating, and varying sounds that go off at varying times and over varying lengths of time. I just bought 2. One has been vacuum packed and put in her Windows box, which sits outside of her bedroom, and the other behind a tile around her front door. I hope that this becomes a lesson for her that hell hath no fury like a gay man mildly inconvenienced.
The next one is an entitled people story.
Bit of background before I start. The story happened when I was still working as a machinist back when I was 19. I started that job on second shift, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., but was transferred to weekend shift, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., barely 6 months later. And the manager for weekend was an older man we'll call Jay. This is important for later, since weekend was severely understaffed. We were each put in charge of multiple machines. I was in charge of running 4 machines that formed a big block in a corner of the factory hardly anyone ever went to. One Friday morning, as I was setting up my machines, a short, rotund man with a Vernon Dursley mustache walked up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder, surprised that I had a visitor. I pulled my head out of the machine and greeted him. Me. Well, me. EM equals entitled manager. Me. Hi, can I help you with something? Entitled manager. I'm his name. Me. Okay. Nice to meet you. I'm my name. Holds out my hand for him to shake, which he ignores. Entitled manager. Yeah, I'm just looking around trying to get a feel for the place, you know. Me. Understandable, I guess. I trailed off, not really sure what he wanted, and knowing that I had about 20 minutes to get the machines going before I fell behind on my work order. Entitled manager. You've got a pretty nice setup here. I wouldn't have known there was anyone working back here if I hadn't wandered over this way. Me. I guess. Entitled manager. I bet you have fun back here. You can slack off all day and no one comes by to bother you. He laughs in a kind of a condescending way. Me, sorry, but is there a point to this conversation or can I finish setting up? Yeah, I probably could have been a little more tactful here, but I worked my ass off and had the highest job completion rate out of every shift who ran those machines, which was quite a feat considering I was alone and the other shifts had between 2 and 4 people running those same machines. Entitled manager sneers at me. You don't know who I am, do you? Me? Nope. Should I? Entitled manager. Yeah, you should. I'm your new boss. Me. I stare at him for a second and then laugh. No crap? Did Jay finally retire? Entitled manager. What Jay? What's he got to do with this? Me. Jay's my manager. It was at that moment I realized he'd gotten ahead of himself and didn't even know who he was in charge of yet. Titled manager. No, he's not. I am, but I was just promoted to first shift manager. That means you work for me. Me? No, that's not what that means. I said slowly. I'm on weekend shift, not first, so you're not my boss. Jay is. Entitled manager. If you're weekend, then why are you running first shift's equipment? He asked in an aha, gotcha kind of way. Me, this is where I've been assigned. You want specifics? You're going to have to ask the manager. I didn't choose which machines I run. Titled manager, I am your manager. Me, no, you're not. Now, can I please get back to work? Entitled manager steps into my personal space and looks up at me with a frown on his face, like it was somehow my fault that I was a foot taller than he was. I'm the first shift manager. Me. Good for you, man. And I mean that. But that doesn't mean you're my manager. Entitled manager pokes me in the chest. I'm the first shift manager. That means you have to listen to me. Me. Looks down at his finger, then he takes a step back so he isn't touching me anymore. Don't do that. Entitled manager, seemingly amused by my response, steps closer and tries to poke me again. It was at that moment that my actual manager showed up. Jay. What's going on, OP? Machine's ready to get moving. Me. Not yet. I was just being introduced to entitled manager here. Guess I got distracted. Jay. Sees how irritated I look and quickly realized what was going on. Is that right? Hey, entitled manager, why don't you let me introduce you to the other weekend guys? OP's got to get these machines going so he can make rate. Entitled manager smirks at me. Yeah, sure. Have a good day, OP. I'll see you later. Jay leads him away, and I get back to work without any more interruptions for the rest of my shift. But entitled manager had apparently decided that my defiance was unacceptable and something he needed to personally correct. So I hadn't seen the last of him just yet. Over the next 5 months, every encounter with EM went about the same way. He would try to give me orders, I would refuse, and he would keep pressing until I got irritated. But eventually, Jay just got tired of hearing EM complain about me, not listening to him, and called me into the office for a chat. He basically told me just to suck it up and do what he asked, that it was only because that I wasn't listening to him that he just kept bugging me, and then if I just gave in, he would get bored eventually and leave me alone. So I begrudgingly went along with it and started doing all of the bullcrap tasks he wanted me to do. These tasks included painting tables for first shift, fixing entire baskets full of parts that first shift screwed up, shoveling brass chips from a wheelbarrow to a barrel for absolutely no reason, and setting up machines for the first shift. And I was expected to do those while still doing my own job. If I didn't really need the money, I would have quit the moment Jay told me to go along with this bull crap. But since I didn't, entitled manager only got more brazen as time went on. Things finally came to a head one Saturday morning. Someone on third shift had forgotten to lock up the machine after a sensor malfunction. So I went about setting it up for the next order code, like I always did, completely unaware of the time bomb I had my head inside of. One of the pneumatic doors bugged out due to the faulty sensor and slammed shut on my hand. I should mention I had the machine in setup mode, which should have stopped that from happening, but that's why it's so important to lock out a machine when there's a sensor or an electrical issue in those machines. I was lucky my hand wasn't crushed. As it was, my hand basically turned into a single giant bruise that even made it down to the bones. With the help of another coworker, I got my hand out and went and reported the accident to Jay. Company policy stated that I had to go to the hospital to have it checked out. After having the machine inspected, Jay knew I couldn't have done anything to prevent it, but I still had to go take a drug test after the hospital visit as a formality. Well, entitled manager got wind that I was involved in the accident and decided now would be a great time to press his luck. He comes barging into Jay's office demanding to know why I was stupid enough to put my hand inside a machine that everyone knew was messed up. Me, because I didn't know it was messed up. Entitled manager, that's bullcrap. You just wanted an excuse to go home. I ignored him and kept my eyes focused on Jay while he finished filling out my paperwork. Entitled manager, I always knew you were a pussy, but this is a new level even for you, OP. What, you can't stand working like a real man, so you're just going home? I kept trying to ignore him. Entitled manager, hey OP. OP, I'm talking to you. He steps around in front of me and pokes me in the chest while still ranting at me. Him touching me was the last straw. Me, Jay, get this stupid ducker out of my face. Entitled manager, oh, you've done it now, he said triumphantly. You can't talk to me like that. I'm a manager. I'll have you fired. Me, do it. Please, for the love of God, fire me. Jay, OP, calm down. Just think about what you're saying. Me, Jay, I swear to God, if he's still in this office in 3 seconds, I'm going to pick up this chair and I'm not going to stop until it's broken, or he is. That shut EM up. For a minute anyway, entitled manager, Jay, are you going to let him talk to me like that? He just threatened me, Jay. I'll advise you to shut the hell up and leave. OP's a big guy, and I'm too old to try and stop him if he decides to follow through. Entitled manager darted out of the room a few seconds later. Jay, you know you can't threaten people like that, OP. I'll back you up this time because he was out of line, but I won't be able to protect you next time. Me, yeah, thanks. Jay, I'll call you when I leave the hospital. I said just before leaving the office and driving myself 20 miles to the nearest hospital. Entitled manager never tried to harass me after that day. In fact, he did his best to avoid going anywhere near me after that day. But he didn't exactly learn his lesson either. LOL. I'll tell you that story if anyone is interested in it. The next story is titled, My Neighbor Trespassed on My Land and Called the Police to Evict Me from My Own Property. My family owns a large plot of land, about 80 acres in a rural area. My parents have always been very protective of it, and we had several no trespassing signs around the property. Despite our efforts, we often found evidence of people wandering onto our land. One summer day, I was out exploring the property on my own. I had a camera with me, hoping to capture some wildlife on film. As I wandered deeper into the woods, I noticed there was a strange man following me. He was about my dad's age, but I didn't recognize him at all. I tried to ignore him, hoping that he would eventually turn around and leave me alone. As I walked, I started to feel more and more uneasy. The man was getting closer and closer to me, and I could hear him muttering under his breath. I decided to head back to the house, but when I turned around, the man was right behind me. Hey, what do you want? I asked, trying to sound confident. The man just stared at me for a moment, then lunged forward and grabbed my camera. I tried to fight him off, but he was much stronger than I was. He started ranting about how we had no right to own all this land and how he was going to take it all from us. I was terrified, but I managed to break free and run back to the house. When I got there, I was out of breath and shaking with fear. I told my parents what happened, and my dad immediately called the police. While we waited for them to arrive, my mom locked all the doors and windows, and my dad grabbed his shotgun. When the police showed up, they searched the property and found the man still lurking in the woods. He had a knife and a rope with him, and he was clearly up to no good. They arrested him and charged him with trespassing, theft, and assault. We later found out the man had been arrested several times before for similar crimes. He was a dangerous criminal who had been terrorizing the area for years. I'm grateful that I was able to get away from him unharmed and that my family's land is safe once again. Update. Since that incident, my family has installed security cameras around the property and hired a private security company to patrol the area. We've also become more involved in the local community, attending meetings and speaking out about the importance of protecting private property. It's been a scary experience, but it's also made us more aware of the dangers that can lurk in the woods. Oh, God, this is garbage. The next story is titled, Lawyer Threatened to Sue Me for a 1-Star Review. Now, his 1-star reviews are going viral. Lawyers scam me and my family to the point where we're seeking recourse in court. I left the lawyer a 1-star review and the lawyer threatened to sue me for defamation. It was all true. If I didn't remove that review, it all backfired as I added that fact to my review. Now, the lawyer is getting tons of upvotes on my review and random 1-star reviews harassing him from everywhere. He even got a 1-star review from the Northwest Territories of Canada. Laugh out loud, they're so secluded from the rest of Canada that I didn't even know in my naivety that they spoke English up there. The lawyer who did me wrong is now a laughingstock. Edit. Wow, I was not expecting this to get this type of traction. Hence the very hasty language on my post. Thank you for your support. In light of having reviewed your comments, I feel the need to address a few things. First of all, yes, I filed a grievance against this lawyer, and yes, the local law society, bar association reprimanded him. But no, this lawyer did not give my family and myself the money that we had been scammed out of back. So that's why we're headed to court as well. Second, we've got a good number of family friends who are lawyers and who had minor input on the case. All have agreed that this lawyer has no leg whatsoever to stand on because everything this rotten apple in the legal community did was in malice, and there is no defamation in the review whatsoever. Lastly, someone from the Northwest Territories left a comment, and I just wanted to clarify what I meant by the NWT being so secluded. By all objective measures, the NWT is described as very remote online. However, you all rock, and I love Northern Canadians. And if you're reading this, JS from the NWT, you're a legend, my friend. I'm sure I'll do an updated post after the final verdict is delivered in court someday. D. As an honorable mention for comments, I'll note that the vast majority of lawyers out there are still great people. I've even got a lawyer representing me, as there is so much at stake. The last story is titled Entitled Karen Makes a Fuss Over My Plane Seat, then insists that I pay for her to move. So this happened back in January 2018, so my memory may be a little bit fuzzy. I'm a 23-year-old man who usually visits my parents and siblings for Christmas and New Year's because that's the only time I can see them. So I'm at the airport waiting to board my flight as I see a woman getting angry because her kids were tired and wanted to get on the plane. I think nothing of it, and I hope she's not sat near me. Note, she was at my gate. As I was approaching my seat, an aisle seat in the business class, because I knew it would be smarter than asking people to stand up so I can get to the bathroom, when I get to my seat, I see one mother and two kids, one in my seat, and I tell the mother that's my seat. She is visibly pissed at that statement and snaps back, "No, it's not, idiot." Me not wanting to have a fight on the plane grabs the attention of a flight attendant, and I show her my boarding pass. So the flight attendant asks for her to move from my seat politely. And as being asked to move her seat, Karen gets in a raised voice, not shouting, says, "This is my seat. I paid for it, so duck off." The flight attendant, still being polite, asked to see the boarding passes to check the seats. The entitled mother pulls two out of the seats next to mine. The flight attendant, slightly less kind, says, "Ma'am, these are only two boarding passes. Where is the third one?" The mother, thinking she's smart, says, "Well, I must have dropped the third one, so I can't give it to you." So this causes me to buy into the conversation and say that I have the boarding pass for that seat because it's my seat. The look on her face, you could have thought I slapped her kid and called her an idiot, because she then shouts, "Give me my boarding pass, you idiot." I'm confused why she's so delusional at this point, because it's obviously my ticket since I bought it. The next part was back and forth arguing, which I can barely remember, but from what I do remember, it was the flight attendant saying that I clearly paid for this seat as it had my name on the boarding pass, and her arguing for a few more minutes before stopping, grinning, and then she said, "Well, if you want me to move so bad, how about you pay to upgrade me and my children to first class?" I responded by saying, "Miss, I only have a business class seat because I do a trip like this once a year. So I tend to be comfortable during my flight, and I don't have the funds for 3 first-class tickets." The flight attendant then says to Karen, "Either you or one of your children will have to move, or else we'll have to remove you from the flight." Then, without holding back, she screeches, "If I leave, he's going to touch my babies." Me and the flight attendant are physically taken aback after hearing this. After that, I stopped trying to be nice and responded, "Get the duck out of my seat and never make those claims again, you self-centered idiot." The flight attendant tries to calm me down and calls for security. In the end, the Karen and her children were escorted off the flight, and I got a row to myself. I forgot about it until the other day, so I decided to post it here after getting into listening to these stories on YouTube anyways. Thanks for reading my story.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
This is an old story, but it just popped into my head while I was hunting through videos on YouTube, so I figured I'd post it. This is an old story, and I can't remember exactly how all the conversations went, so they're pretty much my recollection. Years ago, shortly after I had left the service, my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved in together, halfway across the U.S. from both our respective families. Long stories from another time. And to a place where we both had friends as a result of our military travels. One of my wife's friends, we'll call her Anna, had gotten married in the intervening years since they had last been together, and was in the process of a divorce since her husband had knocked up the checkout girl at the local orchard. She had left the home, a single wide trailer, important later, that they owned, left the car they owned, which she had solely paid for and was still in her name, moved back in with her parents, and got a second job. She already worked at a large big box retail establishment. Of course, my wife and I commiserated with her on multiple occasions about how poorly she had been treated. Anna made a remark at one point about missing her bills that month. My wife asked, "What bills?" "You live with your parents, you have 2 jobs, no credit cards, and you never do anything expensive. What could you possibly owe anyone money for?" Turns out that she had a checking account still linked to her ex-husband's account, and when he decided not to pay the mortgage or car payment, they simply took it out of her account, marked the loan current, and went on with their lives. Shortly after the divorce, he would make most payments, but for the last year or so, he hasn't made a single one. So ex-hubby has perfect credit because he never misses a payment, and Anna's credit is in the toilet because she is constantly late on her own bills. Anna may have 2 jobs and not a lot of bills, cell phone, car payment, insurance. When she's making someone else's mortgage and car payments as well, she's pretty much broke, and that's why she never does anything expensive and has to have me change your oil in my gravel driveway because she can't afford $20 for Jiffy Lube. I asked her why she didn't close the account and go somewhere else. Anna's answer, "But if they miss their payments, the bank will take their house and their car, and they have a baby. I can't do that to them." I did the Forrest Whitaker eye. Then I said, "They're taking advantage of you pretty badly. They've established that you'll pay all their bills for them, and they can do whatever the hell they want because you'll never force the sale of the house or the car. If I had an option to pay my bills or pass it off to someone I don't like, I'd let them do it every time." He's paying an electric bill and getting a free house, car, and everything else. And I guarantee you that he's handing these bills to the social worker and claiming he can't afford to live. So they'll give him WIC, food stamps, and everything else. You're funding the lifestyle of an a-hole who cheated on you and a woman who knew he was married because every time she came over, she made him take your wedding pictures down. So she didn't have to look at you while she screwed your husband. You're paying bills for a guy who is so dumb that he thought he could get a woman pregnant he wasn't even married to, and to a woman who thought if she had an orgasm before she came over to sleep with your husband while you were at work, her egg would be gone and she couldn't get pregnant. The dumb bitch was using a sex toy as birth control. You see, I may not give a rip about most of my family, but you do not duck with my friends. She gives it some thought and a couple of days later asks for some help out of this. I took her to the bank to get an account the next day. She moves her direct deposit, withdraws her money, and closes her old account. The next month, ex-hubby's bills don't get paid. We're watching a movie when he calls. She spends an hour in a screaming match with him, telling him to pay his own bills. She has been charitable enough, and he and his new wife can pay for their own crap. Then the penny drops. Remember earlier when I said the house was a trailer? Anna has been paying the mortgage on the trailer, but not the rent for the lot it's on. They never had her checking account. This entitled prick has been assuming she's been paying that too. She assumed he had. He hasn't even figured out what's coming yet. He's calling because he's pissed off she hasn't paid the lot rent in forever, and he's being told to pay up, move his trailer, or they'll do it and hold the trailer in arrears until the bill for moving it is paid. He's calling to ask her for another $6,000, or they'll lose the home they both love so much. Now, up until this moment, Anna had been this sweet, wonderful gumdrop of a person, the type of person that it should be legal to slap if they're encountered before 9 a.m. The relentlessly sunny person that you send into the room to cheer up Tinkerbell. In the better part of a year, I haven't heard this woman say a bad thing about anybody. Up until tonight, until this guy called to complain that she hadn't been paying enough of his bills. And she loses her mind. She lights into this guy that he'd better figure it out because he's not getting another penny from her ever again. And while he's figuring out who to beg, borrow, or steal that money from, he may want to get a little extra, since he's about to get the overdue notices for the house and the car, too. He starts screaming so loudly I can hear what he's calling her from across the room. before she calmly hits the end button, flips the phone over, pops the battery out, sets them both down on the table, hits play on the VCR, morphs back into a normally sunny self, and offers to make popcorn. Monday morning, she went to the lawyer, filed a no-contact order, filed for bankruptcy. Her credit was already a mess, and there were bills with her name on. She didn't want that splatter all over her, and called the dealer that owned her car note, told her she couldn't make the payments anymore, and offers them a voluntary repossession, has them bring out their tow truck, and meets the driver with the keys and the paperwork. Signs the forms, asks the driver oh so sweetly to drop her off at her parents' house on the way back to the dealer, and waves at her ex from the passenger seat of the tow truck as he comes running out of the trailer wearing only a towel. Over the course of the next month or two, he lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. His wife had to go back to weighing pears at the orchard. Turns out she'd left her job when Anna was paying for everything, and sell his record collection, which was what he had been spending his money on while someone else was paying for everything. On the bright side, I picked up the original vinyl copies of Abbey Road and Yellow Submarine for a total of $5 because his idiot wife running their yard sale didn't understand why the old crappy records were worth anything anyway. And that's how Tinkerbell burned some entitled a-hole's life to the ground. The next story is titled, My HOA Neighbor Illegally Trespasses on My Property to Steal Water for Their Unapproved Pool. A few years ago, my family and I decided to go on a much-needed vacation to visit some relatives. Before we left, I made sure to double-check everything in the house, from the locks on the doors to the windows. I had no idea that one of the last things I checked, the spigot in the backyard, would be the one thing that would be the cause of the biggest headache of my life. Our neighbor was an obnoxious and entitled person, always thinking that the world revolved around him. Whenever he saw us outside, he would come over and start talking about himself, boasting about his achievements and making it clear that he was superior to us in every way. I tried my best to avoid him, but it wasn't easy when he lived right next door. The weekend we were gone, our neighbor saw an opportunity to take advantage of us. He used a hose from our backyard spigot to fill his in-ground pool and an extension cord from our outlet to power his backyard. He didn't care that it was illegal or that it was stealing. He just wanted to save some money on his water and electric bill. He didn't think he would get caught, but he was wrong. When we returned from our vacation, I noticed that the grass in our backyard had a large dent in it, and something told me to check our security cameras. When I did, I was furious. There he was, my neighbor, trespassing onto my property, stealing my water and electricity, and acting like he owned the place. I decided to call the police and report him for trespassing and theft. The police came and gave him a warning for trespassing and said that he would have to pay for the water and electricity that he used that weekend. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to get revenge on him for what he had done. I remembered him boasting to me before about how he had installed his pool without permits to avoid paying fees and how it was not up to safety standards. That's when I had an idea. I decided to call my HOA and report my neighbor's pool for violating safety guidelines. The HOA promptly investigated, and they found several safety violations, including the lack of a permanent ladder, being too close to the back doors, and failing to cover the pool when not in use. As it turns out, my neighbor had not followed the HOA rules for private pools. The HOA informed him that he would have to remove the entire pool, and he had to pay a fine for building it without permits. He was left with a big hole in his backyard filled with dirt and a severely damaged property value. My neighbor was livid, and he soon moved away, but not before he threatened to get revenge on me. For months, I lived in fear that my neighbor would come back and try to get revenge on me. I didn't know what he was capable of, and I didn't want to find out. But as time went on, I realized my fear was unfounded. My neighbor never came back, and I was able to relax and enjoy my life without worrying about him. As an update, a few years after my neighbor moved, a new family moved in. They were friendly and courteous, and we became good friends. The new neighbor always respected my boundaries and privacy, and I appreciated their thoughtful approach to being good neighbors. One day, the new neighbors invited me over to their backyard to show me something. When I got there, I was surprised to see they had installed a beautiful swimming pool. It was clear they had gone through all the proper channels to get the necessary permits, and it was up to safety standards. As we sat around the pool sipping drinks and enjoying the sunshine, I couldn't help but feel grateful for my new neighbors. They had reminded me that not all neighbors are difficult, and it's always better to resolve issues through proper channels. Like the HOA, as we talked, my new neighbor revealed that they had a run-in with our old neighbor before they moved in. They had heard that he had installed a pool without permits, and they had reported him to the HOA, but they didn't know how serious the situation was until they moved in and saw the big hole in the ground in the old neighbor's backyard. They were shocked that someone would go to such lengths to avoid paying fees. As we continued to talk, I noticed that my new neighbor seemed to be getting upset. When I asked what was wrong, he told me that he had received a threatening letter from our old neighbor. The letter stated that he knew about the HOA report and that he would get revenge on them for reporting him. I immediately called the police, and they took the letter as evidence. They told us that they would investigate, but we didn't hear anything for weeks. We started to worry that our old neighbor was up to something. We didn't know what to do. One day, while I was at work, I received a call from my new neighbor. He was frantic, and he told me that he had heard a noise in his backyard. He had gone to investigate, and he found that someone had cut the power to his house. He was terrified that our old neighbor was trying to hurt him, and he didn't know what to do. I rushed over to his house, and we called the police. They arrived quickly, and we found that someone had cut the power line to my neighbor's house. They couldn't be sure who did it, but they suspected that it was our old neighbor. They told us to be careful and to call them if we noticed anything suspicious. For weeks, we lived in fear that our old neighbor was going to come after us. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, and we didn't feel safe in our own homes. But eventually, the police caught our old neighbor, and he was charged with trespassing, theft, and criminal mischief. He was sentenced to prison, and we finally felt safe again. As an update, my new neighbor and I have become even closer since that incident. We all realize that having good neighbors is important, and we look out for each other. We have formed a neighborhood watch, and we make sure that everyone in the neighborhood feels safe and secure. In the end, the incident with our old neighbor taught us that it's always better to resolve issues through proper channels, and that having good neighbors is essential. We also learned that sometimes people are willing to go to great lengths to avoid paying fees, and it's important to be vigilant. But most of all, we learned that when we work together, we can overcome even the most challenging situations. The next story is titled, EM Demands Nurse Make Me Cover My Tattoo That's Scaring Her Sleeping Child. I'm in the ER waiting room, and an EM comes in with her deathly ill child that's fast asleep in her arms. I'm wearing a tank top and have a Spirited Away theme piece on my upper arm. I've been here for 2 hours already. EM keeps looking my way, huffing, dramatic sighs, and dirty looks. I have no interest in engaging, so I continue to ignore her. Finally, she stops a nurse and says, "You need to tell that person to cover that awful offensive tattoo." Nurse gives a blank stare. EM continues, "It's scaring my child. He's traumatized." Nurse looks at me. I meet her gaze out of the corner of my eye. She looks down at EM and tells her to wait outside or in her car if she had a problem. EM keeps saying how traumatized her child is. She's woken him up now from her yelling. She tells security that I need to move or cover up my horrific arm, or she's going to call the cops for indecent exposure. At this point, everyone is fed up. Security tells her to quiet down and take a seat or leave. Final warning. At this point, I'm laughing. Long story short, she tried to call the cops. An officer was already here. He poked his head in to look at me, then walked back out. Said something to her, and she left screaming bloody murder about indecent exposure to my poor child. I'm still currently in the waiting room. The last story is titled, Why is only some of the wine free to taste? The premium wines should also be free. In this wine region, if you go to cellar doors, you can get wine tastings that are free. Hit up a bunch of wineries, and it's a good day. Some cellars may have a premium range, which they ask for a small fee to sample, but there will be other wines you can taste for free. Any place that charges you a fee will refund the fee if you buy any wine. Went to a well-known place and tasted about 10 wines for free. They had a premium dessert range, and if I wanted to sample that, it would be $10. I'm not into sweets, so I skipped that even though I was buying other wine. The other random couple were already there before we arrived for our tasting. They had been low-key arguing with a staff member the entire time we were there and walked through 10 wines, and who knows how long before we arrived. I was buying some wine, so approached the register near the couple. Karen and the couple was very insistent on sampling the premium dessert wines, but did not want to pay. Sweet wines are my absolute favorite, so I will definitely buy a lot of bottles, so you should give me a free tasting anyway. The very patient staff member was repeatedly explaining that the $10 would immediately be credited to any wine purchase. I left Karen still arguing with staff. She could have hit another nearby winery and tasted a dozen wines in the time she took to argue over $10. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.